Except airwoods and ferns.
Airwoods and ferns? Oh, the good thing we're a tropical plant society. Airwoods and ferns. Well, I'm sure you'll be just fine. But anyway, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brett Jestrow. I'm glad to meet you. Thank you very much, Brett.
Oh, mine, okay. So I have to say, I've been giving talks a while. This is a little different than most. But I used to give talks kind of on a research topic. There I give talks on trips. People like Jason there, fix it and whatnot. And I guess more recently, I really started being director of collections in 2017. And I started giving more talks on like status as a garden. What happens when we say collection is really kind of horticulture. It's for a museum, we're part of the American Association of Museums. So every 10 years, they kind of want to update how you manage collections. And so we went through it, we updated it, it was fine, but it got us thinking more about what we grow and why we grow it. I'm going to mention that a little bit here, as well as a couple other little projects. I know we don't want to get too much into policy around that. So, anyway, I'm going to start off with, let's start with this image. So it's an early one, 1943. Lyman Phillips, the faculty scientists started to go in, they started to replace families, regenerative ponds, all data are bringing up the families. But the garden's always changed. Keeps developing. There's no rainforest here. Back in the old pictures in the 60s, it was just open, we felt oak trees. So it really keeps developing. There's like Victoria, there's a Madagascar plot. So it's not always static. You have to kind of update policy. But I want to just get a sense of where we are. And a lot of times people think they go, it's Fairchild Tropical Garden, but actually it's subtropical because you're not between those lines of latitude. And that's a fair point, but we can also look at the climate. And if you've got a climate table, climate classification, we're in a tropical monsoon. They don't get considered subtropical, tropical monsoon. And if you picture, you can kind of see why it's hard to see that's a little bit of blue. It's all tropical groups, not only monsoon, we're just in that kind of tropical world. We don't really freeze. But we do have the crisis. And part of the reason that it's all black, so you got the warm Gulf Stream coming up from the Caribbean. It's just this little peninsula. We're really kind of at a desert latitude, actually. If you look around the world, it's very much like Sahara, Chihuahua Desert, Mexico. So that's another way to look at it. You kind of look at it by latitude, you look by climate. I want to mention Tomlinson. Dr. Tomlinson was the first scientist hired at Fairchild. Actually, if you know those little buildings in the rainforest, the Hawks Lab was what he was called. He was the first scientist hired to do it. And one book he wrote the biology of trees named Tropical Florida. And here he kind of made a little map on the edge. And he called that tropical because that's the zone where the majority of trees share their range with the Caribbean and not North America. So you have a kind of different way to look at tropics. Let's look at the ecologies of Florida. And so in this area, 90% of the trees native share their range in the Caribbean, only 10% North America. And that really flip-flops by the time you get to Okeechobee. So here's looking at this zone, and kind of a different perspective. That was a book he published here many years ago. And part of that idea is, 90% of their share of the Caribbean. So we kind of share this thing with this whole Caribbean floristic region. And it's really important. But there's some shortcomings to that. So what I want to say, some plants we can't grow, just wrong climate. And I don't mean not necessarily winter growers. You guys familiar with winter growers when I say that? I really mean plants that grow in a cool, wet winter, have a hot, dry summer, kind of the Mediterranean climate. A lot of people visit places like the Huntington in California, kind of wonder, hey, why don't you grow this great aloe? And they don't like the humidity of regular summer. It's too warm. They like that dry summer or winter. And actually, the more people, if you're into aloe collecting, you're going to some nursery online, like Aerial Greenhouses, amazing collections. You really got to look at where they're from. So Western Cape, South Africa, but not really in the tropics, but in the tropical. It's got to be tough. And maybe if you play with it, bring it indoors, summer, that sort of game, you can't really do that in gardens. The other thing I think is important is hydrotropicals. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I imagine that's important. You guys do ferns, I imagine some arrowhead growers. Some of you are familiar with epigenera, right? It's fruit flora. Highlanders can be a different deal. This would be a great palm to grow at garden here in China. It's tallest groups of palms, Ciroc salon, from really high elevations in Colombia.
Do you have light?
I don't have a mic. Is anyone else struggling here yet?
Yeah, we are now.
I stand closer and climb for step one. So Highland tropicals can be tough to grow here, and kind of why. And when we look at Highland tropicals, it's go like, it's Caribbean, it's from the Dominican Republic. But the thing is, there's high elevations in the Dominican Republic. Eco-Jordan is over 3,000 meters. And if you start getting to fern collecting, you go to some of these exotic shows, you can find some stuff over 1,000 meters, called intermediates, over 2,000 meters at high elevation, then up to alpine. So, let's see if this works. Ew. So what I want to show here, this is where I'm going to sidestep. I know I want to talk about elections, but I got a little project in mind, and I thought you guys might find this interesting. And basically, this is actually a website we have up there called Windows to Tropical Highlands. And you try to go online to find it, it's actually growing beyond .earth. And it comes off this project, Carlo director working a lot with students around Miami, growing plants with LED lights, and kind of using the community developed data as product mass. What Carlos develops little tools. We can measure light, we can measure humidity, all of this. He's not looking for something what we can do in the garden. I'll show this. So actually, if you guys know the garden pretty well, between our shade house, the Whitman Pavilion, we've got that hallway. We put in a window. And I've started trying to play with some Highland tropicals. It's brand new, so don't think it's arranged well yet or fully drummed in. But what we're doing here is we're dropping the temperature down to 55 degrees at night and not letting it get over 75 a day. That's pretty classic Highland. That's a little over 2,000 meters. When I look at Highlands, intermediates, and lowlands, in South Florida, in my experience, Highlands tend to die the first summer, and intermediates die the second summer. But this is what we're going to get into. We're not going to have them on sales. People aren't going to blow them up. But we do want to show some extra little plants that you can't really see to explain the concept of biology. And when we think about anything like global warming like this, that could be more of an issue in some of these things. Okay, push that out. Just for fun, I had to start somewhere. This is a photograph from maybe a couple of months ago. We just opened this. This is pretty much the day we opened it up. You got a little QR code on the side, it'll take you to that website. And it does coincide with our bugs exhibit, so having some insectivorous plants to start off with kind of works a bit. These things are really hard to display. So there's a couple things. We can grow these high elevation plants, tell the story about why those are hard to grow here, even though they may be from the Caribbean. And exhibit them of the Drosera, that's a small plant from Queensland. How do you exhibit that in garden when it's this big, needs full sun and pure water? Even if you have the right temperature, we do have some natives that can't just know what we can grow. It doesn't let you grow some smaller things, you do some orchids. Here you can see that Phalaenopsis. But this one is a hybrid of Nepenthes. I don't know if anyone here has grown the Nepenthes. Still like the Nepenthes, I love the Nepenthes whole group. There are some you can grow here outdoors. Just a few species. A little tough. Even if it's rare, people think, oh, I'll take the temperature lower in my house from 72 to 75. It doesn't work for most. Most of them need to get down to at least 65 every night. So they're really easy up in San Francisco. Even in Atlanta Botanical Garden has a really impressive high elevation house. They have a whole conservatory that they keep from 75 a day, 55 at night. And you go, well, Atlanta's pretty hot, but not when they're winter. They're heating it. I mean, it's much, much harder to do that. But at least want to get the idea. I think the tech's making it easier to use. This is all LED light. And again, if you go online and look at the website right now, you can see what the temperature and status is. So it'll actually give you the highlight temperature. I just took this picture this afternoon. So kind of 55.2 is the lowest, 76.3. And we can kind of collect data on it and play with it. Let's see. If things work, maybe we can make a bigger one. What's kind of interesting with some of these different plants, I think about what people can grow in apartments as well as on the balconies and patios. Right? So if you have these LEDs get better or even light tubes, you can kind of grow things indoors the way not match your plant. But anyway, I just wanted to show that. I do like some oddballs. So we're starting off with some hybrid things and get them growing up. And even, this is one I was keeping alive in our greenhouse back in the nursery. And it got small at that second year. It's intermediate. It got down to 1 inch. Now it's got a few inch picture in 6 months. So we started putting plants here about January, and this is what's growing in. People think Saracenia, you know, those kind of things from the southeast, we're still too warm for it. But this is a high elevation version from beyond. It's that same family. Get more dressed over. And probably one of my favorites I really like to show. It looks a little like an Penthes. But unlike the Penthes, which have the picture coming off the leaf, this one has a regular leaf, or just from the plant. This is from Australia, completely different part of the world, whole different bird. But anyway, small little exhibit, but I think you're going to see also some fun high elevation ferns. We've got pre-pink crawling in there. So it'll be filling in. I did go to Atlanta not too long ago, and they're trying to give me some cuttings. Yeah, we got a whole bunch of little ferns, everything from liverworts, different mosses I'm going to try out. Anyway, so a little side digression here. So what else do we grow? We don't usually have things taken from habitat, right? We don't go out when people do research for planting, filter better than wild. We don't go out shovel this. But we do have a few plants that we're shoveling out. There's salvage, actually. If you go to the Bailey Pond Way, our famous wedding picture, these Tocothrynax were collected from the Keys. And specifically Bailey Pond Key for some of them. They had back then a development in the 90s. It's after Hurricane Andrew. They needed to have ponds. And so those were dug up and planted here in 93. We also have some things like that macrozania that was brought up from Australia, shipped to us on mature southeast. From the government, again, they tried to find homes for plants after permitting sort of area. So we do have some salvage. Just briefly, we did keep track of plants. Again, you know, we're doing the museum thing. So if you now have a little database, you'll find these little black codes. And again, it's not just the species we're interested in. We take care of one palm may be carefully selected from habitat. That gets a different number from one Joe's palm shaft. So we keep track of this one. And I just want to make sure people are somewhat aware of this website, which is fairly, I guess we started this maybe 5 years ago, really online, but it's gotten better. And it's Garden Explorer, which is fairchild.gardenexplorer.org, and you can search all of our plants that we're growing on display. We still have a few things hiding out in the conservatory working on, but it's now pretty good, pretty up to date. And try to update. This is also where we store all of our photos and all of our info. So if you want photos, you can go to tours. If you want a topic. We also have some goofy tours. I have the irrigation tour, which I work with Landscape, our irrigation guys. We've got 45 solenoid valves spaced all over. And with this, it all maps it out. I can just send a picture and I work it. So pretty useful. Just want people to be aware of it. So we accessioned more than before. If you go back to the day here in Fairchild, a lot of things that were pre-existing were never accessioned. And that really changed with Hurricane Andrew. That's when they went through and made sure all the trees. And that's really important for a place like FEMA. The last time Hurricane Irma, we had 90 trees coming down. You want to start working with what happened. You have to have data that's how to map where they are. So all our trees are. One exception, if you ever go by the pergola, we have a little organic vegetable garden. That switches out so much. It's done by a little different cooperative. They do a great job. Those are not exceptions. Most of our grass or lawns aren't exception, but we might change it. We're starting to try new varieties. We were exceptioning one before, just to keep track what we're doing. The other thing I want to bring up is we've been selling plants online since COVID hit in 2020. We used to do just kind of in-person plant sales. We do sell online. We update new stuff every Thursday. But we make sure it's things that we're propagating here at the garden. So we're not losing collections. That's a big point for us. We get a rare plant. It's in the garden. We don't sell that to plants, right? We don't want to lose that extension. We can propagate from it. Yeah. And we do. If we want to get out plants to the public, which has been going on in the garden since its earliest years. Members Day was about giving plants out, so we still keep that going. We've also even done eBay, and people thought this was a little strange because it's all still in COVID and we're closed. And it's actually been really useful for us. The first thing we learned is we had to get better at shipping.
So you sell on eBay now?
Right now, we don't have anything in eBay at this moment. We've been doing some palm tree, but we will be putting some up shortly. Usually once a week. The online's always happening. And what was interesting is we started to ship and realized we had to get our nursery up to date. We had to get our snail inspection. You had to get your fire inspection. You got to but we started making updates. Somebody could ship to California. And then suddenly now with hunting botanical gardens, we can do exchanges more easily. It made things function better and it raised money and contacted people that may not have heard of Fairchild otherwise. So yeah, we don't want to lose things. You may have this large tree right near the entrance to the pergola. That used to be growing right where the art center was. And that was moved at great expense. Took 2 cranes, they had to reprune it for 6 months. It was a real fiasco because they just, how do you cut down on where you're, that they build value for time collection, right? You can't just get a tree. So it was wildlife and Fairchild got saved. You don't always move it. This guy in our Madagascar pond, it's pretty good. It's almost all southern Madagascar. We've got one Basilarian, which is New World, but it's been there for 65 years. So we're just not moving. It's going to stay there. It's happy. So now I want to sort of switch because I can think people often say, what is rare, right? They go, hey, this is a rare plant. I get questions a lot from things like marketing or whatever. What percentage of the plants here are rare? Okay. And I try to go, okay, there's different, I want to break that down. So when you start going to see rare, what kind of rare you need. And I'm kind of looking at 4 ways. But before I get there, if anyone asks me, what's your rarest plant? Usually this is the easiest one to just point out. Settlers woody eye. It's on Cycad Vista. There's this from 62. And it's extinct in the wild. This actually came here from Stanley Keene, who went to Durban Botanical Gardens in South Africa and got 3 little cuttings. Was able to bring one together.
So that's what makes it rare, being extinct.
So it's extinct in the wild, and if somebody asks me, what's your rarest plant? I'd probably say this one.
Propagation here.
We haven't. And actually, I want to show that this was a propagation done in the 80s. But we recently propagated. I saw Shad here earlier. We worked with a long-time cycad grower in California. And it was quite the mission. We took 16 cuttings back and then was rooting them. It took about 5 years. And then sadly, he died.
The person.
Yes. So his wife ended up moving those plants that made it survive to Huntington. They held on to us, for us. Chad and I then had to fly out, pick them up, and drive them back. But we were able to get from 16 cuttings, 14 took. We gave 2 to his estate, and we had 12 propagations. It's one of the largest propagations in the wild. It's not easy to do. Yeah.
Was there also intent to do tissue culture on it?
People have tried doing tissue culture with cycads, but I don't think anyone's had any success yet. Sometimes you might get a division or 2, but not that propagation. People have tried, I don't know if anyone's still trying. People have also tried crossing it with its closest relative, lenses. It doesn't look the same. It's not working well. Again, they're males and females, so there's no
So we're getting on tissue culturing back about 20 years, 15 years ago for cycads. They had sterilization system.
I don't think they ever go out to
They
work.
never got
Not saying it can't be done in tissue cultures. Yeah, this was one of the ones from our last trip that was propagated plants a couple of years ago. Because if you run out the only one, if you can't propagate it, you're going to lose it eventually. So, anyway, types of rarity. Just really quick, local rarity. I actually think that matters. And I want to give an example here of the key tree cactus. I don't know if you heard, it was in the newspaper. And its population in Key Largo finally died off the last plant. And if you look, again, I'm not going to have a metric, like when people say rare. So I'm looking at Atlas of Florida plants, and I'm looking at what state U.S. governments say. So state endangered, U.S. endangered, probably going to be updated to extinct and habitat.
Well, why did that happen? Disease or?
They were saying part of the argument of that paper was related to sea level rise, but it also a lot of people did a lot of moving and a lot of removing. One of the last groups left were at the lowest part of the
One type is very popular. They get taken on for strong plants, cactus.
And here we have it growing our desert crop. This is a propagation from that last individual. Jenny runs that program, has a bunch that are growing. But that's one way it's locally Florida state endangered. But we'll get back to that in a moment.
What do you refer to with the incipient tempensis?
Well, what I'm saying with that is even very local, I think, can make a good argument. So it is not listed as threatened or endangered in Florida. But if you look in Dade County, eastern Dade County, it should be. So if we look at it from a county perspective, there are not many here. If you drive up to a remote county in the middle of Florida, you can find a lot of incipient tempensis. But I think there's something to be said when you have something really rare that's in a city to kind of bring it back and make sure you're propagating it. And that's where we think of the Billion Orchid Project. You know, Jason propagating this. Yeah, it might be common out in some remote county, but the Florida ones, I mean, I remember them in Miami. A lot of them have been removed. But that's it's kind of one of my check marks, kind of local rarity counts. I also want to look at global rarity. And this is guy in Ashiai. And this is a trip we did collect, and actually Jason was on this trip. So this is way up north, the way remote Bahamas. This is a picture of Ethan took. Ethan was a botanist with the BNT, and he put in IUCN. So IUCN is a great way to look at global rarity. They're very specific on how their criteria. This is endangered because it's a really narrow area of occupancy. It's just from southeast to Nodwood. So it's globally endangered. And where I think things get a little tricky is the key tree cactus is least concerned. There are some changes recently with the nomenclature, but it's still staying in place. It's very rare in South Florida, but in huge areas of the Bahamas and northern Cuba have it. So we have this thing, sometimes we have locally rare, but globally much more common. We see that a lot in South Florida, not surprising. Because Southern Florida is not that old, and as I was saying with tropical Florida, 90% of it's from the Caribbean. So that little bit from the Caribbean that comes in, maybe a very small population, the Caribbean has a lot more. So that's why we look at the Caribbean a lot, at least coastal Caribbean, for plants we can grow. But things can get a little weird, and this is where I wanted to point out. Signs of things that's a spindle palm, right? From the Indian Ocean. Critically endangered. Very rare palm. And down the street, there's more in my neighborhood in Miami than there is in habitat. And so I want to be careful. I go, well, what's one of your rarest palms to show inside of it? Think of it that's growing in the street next to my recycle bin. So this is where certain plants, even though they're rare and wild, may be common cultivation.
Where are they from?
This is from the Seychelles. I believe so. Local islands. Another useful list is sightings. What's rare in trade? So I got local rarity of that. What's rare in trade? It's a nice list. Sightings is really up to date. It's really orchids, cacti, cycads. We can already see, even though Jen didn't get the global rarity, it's an exploited group. So it's just kind of got two out of 3 check marks. It's starting to be an important plant to the collection. I think it's really interesting when you look at sightings. Again, there's not many ferns or certain groups like orchids, cacti, cycads, so collected. They just made the whole groups. Even man-made hybrids that don't run in the wild. Still controlled by sightings. That's for international trade. sort of fun little Caribbean hybrid on off the gallery. The last one I think is actually becoming one of the most important, which is rarity and cultivation. Certainly your key tree cactus does it, Cephalornis woodii does that. There's no good list that exists for what's grown in the US. Some of the best is BCI, Botanical Garden Conservation. You kind of search what's in botanical gardens, okay. Don't love a lot what's in here. This was a plant that was brought in recently to the US. It's from northern Laos, was described maybe 10 years ago, really colorful, dramatic. They put it right in tissue culture. Now we got it in, we're trying to get it growing. But when we got it in, we're the only garden, the only place growing in the country. So just kind of want to get that going. And this is Musa hockenenia. It really doesn't run off the tongue very easily. And when they made the description, they only found it growing in 2 towns of cultivation. They know it's from the hills nearby, but no one's found a wild location. But actually, horticulture saved that plant, got it out the world. So very nice. Now we have a second clone, hope you can see. But we're dividing. It's a great species, does well for us. The rarity of the country, and things are not getting easier to move things in and out of the country. Work in that world. It's a little tricky. But anyway, there's kind of just a couple of different ways to look at rarity, see the list we look at. And I got a really neat email some years ago. And it was a long time, I love her Fairchild. Instead of putting an email, and I go, we should really look at the curation of palms. And my idea was, should we just make it a goal, let's try to grow all species. And already looking at when we had that example of Syrah's lawn, high elevation Colombia, I think it's over 100 feet tall, it's cool nights, we can never grow that. So something we can grow, but should we really grow all types? And I started to think about that as how we curate plants. And right off the bat, 5th of palm species are spiny climbers. Do we want spiny climbers? Could that be possible? This is a New World one, Desmoncus. This is Calamus. There's probably 400 Calamus species out there. And by the way, almost none of them are in cultivation because there's no demand for them. And if you want to come to the common species, you can get them. You probably have to travel through Africa and Asia extensively. And even if I devoted my whole life to it, I would not get halfway there. So I'm thinking, well, maybe are there any calories climbers that aren't spiny, or maybe they're really dwarf or something that's easy to grow? How about Caribbean? So when we think about like, okay, palms are important group, what are we going to focus on? And one right off the bat is Caribbean, and I'm going to say coastal living. Most of the palms of the Caribbean are lowland. And it's the Caribbean flora, and it just kind of tells us that we share that whole distribution. And a lot of these things that work their natives. This is even on the daily funnel plate, not based across Bola workers, kind of southern Caribbean. And we have a long history with the Caribbean. We have the longest history of working in the field. And that's a good place in the Caribbean to try and do all species. But when we start getting around the world, we should try and get as many palm genera as possible. Now I'm going to kind of place it here along the rest of our collection. Having new families is pretty important. There's about 400 plant families. We have an option to try and grow new ones from the garden. We should try and increase that of this. And we've done the same thing with palms. Nipa. This is a Nipa palm. Mangrove. Indonesia grows right with salt water. Palms have 5 subfamilies. That one species is one of them. But like this is Ryan Hardy of Bristles, window pane palm. They really like acid soil. They hit our alkaline soil. Some of them are going to be tough to grow outside, but let's get the dwarf one into the conservatory and at least have the genus looking good. This is other things we can play with. We irrigate warmer. I've really noticed Miami now we can all grow breadfruit here. I don't know if you've noticed that as a difference. Used to only be in the Keys. Since 2012, we're a lot better. So this is a palm that's been tried here a bunch of times, and mainly from cold. Take it, 2 species in the genus, with Fairchild is favorite. genus of palms, and now we can grow. We've got about 8 feet of trunk off now. And believe me, we're not the first to try. Water is just not quite as harsh. So morphology. This is like interesting shapes. I was kind of missing that. I think of spine bone. Do we have one that's not spiny? And this is not a pond at all. This is something we're able to bring in to the country last, I guess, 2 years ago. And it really jumped out at us. I don't know if you've seen many plants that look like this. It seems like something is off. But it's related to tababuia. It's the same family. So I had a compound leaf. Imagine if these little leaflets disappeared to nothing, and the rake is flat and divided. That's basically what happened when there used to be a leaf that's lost. And the rake makes it a very tough leaf. And it's turning out, through northern Madagascar, it really can handle it in the dry season. It's not deciduous, it stays green and looks good. And it's got that cloud fill. So it's looking like a big winner for us. We're actually doing cuttings. We're going to try and get this out. We haven't seen the flowers set fruit yet. We want to keep it a little longer, see how it performs. But really, it's a plant. We found that if we cut a leaf, you can get a fruiting plant from a leaf cutter. Also sort of odd. Nobody can get that. But I think that's an interesting plant. It grows well for us, and it's got great form. So research collections, and again, this is where I kind of talk about things that are actually collected in habitat. And I call that a research collection. And again, this is where Ethan, it wasn't even known, still didn't know much about the species. Now I understand, know a little more about it. And so kind of both Caribbean as well as potential research, we know a lot about it. This is what it looks like in our desert plot without irrigation. Now imagine this about twice the size. And these, by the way, were planted the same day as these, but it's much larger with irrigation. Really strange. You'd never know that until you started to play with it. I'm not, some agave guy, but in the Caribbean, when I've worked in different places, I wish I could see the agaves. They have kind of potential landscape, salt tolerance, culture. Just this last month, we had our first one flower in the lowlands. So they've been growing like 10 years. Some of these agaves, you plant them 2 years later, they flower and one plant dies. These ones make options, and they rarely flower. So that means you've got some time to grow it. I think it makes it good horticulture, potentially. Research collections. We have a list of plants online, and we grow a lot of tropical plants outdoors that everyone else in the U.S. can't do easily. Except perhaps Hawaii, Puerto Rico. So we had contacted a lot by research people wanting to access certain plants. This was a bizarre. On the left, I have what looks like to me like the most generic tree you could draw. And this is from a Bahamas plot. This is wild collected from Andros in the 60s. The old director, John Rogan. Still sitting there, and it says oddball family, Paracea. On the right, we have the world's largest flower, this oddball thing from Indonesia, endophytic parasites. And when they figured out the evolutionary group, we got on the front page of Nature, big journal, because they figured out what it was related to. And this was the outgroup.
How wide is that flower?
About like this. Some people argue if it is a flower. So when they figured out where it occurred, there's a group at Harvard who can find in Indonesia, get fresh material, look at gene expression to help understand how flowers work. Who knows the application? They need an outgroup, and they couldn't find any other in the country. We have only one individual. We still need to propagate it. The Paracea family doesn't jump out at you. That's a hard thing to go in the wild and find. It's really only from a couple islands of the Caribbean and Central Africa. And so this is the only one in the country of that family. And suddenly this got into the other set of boats to fly out to Mars. They flew down with liquid nitrogen to Earth, collected, and went right back to the lab. But anyway, I thought that was weird. It just, you don't even know what to expect. You get people contacting you. Please don't explain what all of this means. This is a professor that was at FIU, who's now at NYU. But this number here, this is all known plant genomes, 5,600 for known understanding genome size. Let's use this. Now you can get into this. This is the number he's adding to that. At present, the paper he's about to publish, 500 or more genomes. All of those came from Fairchild. And he loved it because he's got this, it's not easy to do that. You need really fresh drawing material to make that measurement. And he could just grab it and take it right to the lab. And so he just went through a few, of course, there's a lot more cooler growing things. They don't have the diversity of tropics. So he's hitting all these groups nobody else had. So almost 10% of genome size of plants is going to be coming from Fairchild, which is again unexpected. So we do, that's where also kind of ties together. We start thinking of like real diversity, genetic diversity. Let's keep diversity going. And when I look at this, let's get every species. Well, sometimes when species we forget new hybrids form for processing. Those still can have use. Some people really care about that. And I think one of the most fun hybrids now kind of developing are these ones with ceiling light spawn. You may remember the Teddy Bueller that was growing. It's clearly a hybrid. More of these coming out and starting to propagate. Those are just so much easier to grow with ceiling wax. I found in the baby. Give them sun, some water, they don't mind the limestone, the sea top, they're much faster. But real potential in the landscape. Because people have different interests. Really different interests. They have to get in trouble without mentioning fruit trees here at some point. I kind of hinted at breadfruit. This is something we want to grow more of. And I have to say, working as a talk to a lot of people come through the garden. People really do have different views. What was interesting was a group looking at natives, of like, what should you grow in your backyard? And so it's like, hey, connect to protect, grow natives, you want butterflies, live around. But another thing I've heard in people go, no, I'm raising a young child, I want to plant fruit trees. I want my kids to have access to good fruit. Don't ask me for an answer, but I think they're both fair. I say grow both, grow as much as you can. People have different world views. We're trying to serve as a major garden for the whole metropolitan areas. But breadfruit. So a long time, you really listen on moth olive. You guys see that saying, moth olive, the classic breadfruit that's been propagated here. We took a trip to Hawaii just a few years ago and went through the university and tried to get new varieties. Let's just try it out there. And we're going to try those. We're going to be planting more breadfruits. I think they're fun because partially they're fast. This tree here, this is 1 year of growth from 1 foot tall. So these things grow 8 feet a year. Very pretty growth. Also pretty beautiful. Also, botanicals, again, a plant that won't jump out at you, but a super oddball group. It's actually more closely related to psychiatric conifers and flowering plants. He was brought in by a late Jack Fisher. I knew him, it was a long time at this.
Is that right, the group wrapped them?
They're not wrapped. You know how they're propagating them in Hawaii at the university? They grow a plant, they rip it out of the ground, they put it in a tub of water, they chop the top off. And around the edge of the trunk, it starts to make little shoots and break those off. Lots of people try to do cuttings. Cuttings really don't work well. But the root shoots do. And actually, if you start growing this, I would cut this off. You'll notice some can pop up even a few feet away from the trunk. A lot of trees can't do that. They can only make leaves off of the top. But they can actually make root suckers. And if you actually look at the breadfruit growing in front of whippet, you may find if you look 10, 15 feet away, you'll see breadfruit somewhere jumping up. That's coming from its root. So it's actually basically root cuttings. After they get about 20 plants off the side of that stump, they cut the next stump. So, yeah, I haven't seen it. But they are quite different. The wild type is all seed. These forms that have been selected, 0 seed, and very different sizes. And even different leaf shapes. So it has a much deeper sinus than you'd see with the moth olive that you usually see in South Florida. Anyway, they're sort of fun group. Anyway, this one's just got botanical, it's oddball family. It's a research collection, wild collected by Jack Fisher. It's certainly rare in the country. So it kind of hits all the bells and whistles, but Jack was great.
What is it?
It's native. Native, and it's a neophyte. So it's not a conifer, not a cycad, not a farm plant, stuck in the middle. And even the leaves are cooked with a lot in Indonesia. Fruits cooked with it, has edible leaf.
They're not toxic in any way. Are they not toxic in any way?
Are they toxic in any way? Not that I know of, though they do cook with it. I haven't seen it raw. They will cook fruit. And this one we actually only have, I think it's a female. We only have one plant, but actually the camphor, we're getting more seeds. Camphor has male and female, so we get to see, get a few more growing. So at least we can pop it.
Where is it in the garden?
This is very easy to find. This is the center of the rainforest in those little brown palms. But it really doesn't jump out to you. It's kind of seeds that really comes. Of course, the curve of the scale counts. Pyramidal counts. We're looking at horticultural potential. We care about how things look as well. People grow stuff they like. And what I want to do is I want to talk about another little installation we've been working on. We just started planting early this year. And I don't even know that it's actually photographed just from maybe 3 months ago. We just started planting. But we're thinking a bit about courtyards and balconies. People in Miami, a lot of people now live in apartments. They have a little balcony space. That balcony is south-facing. That's pretty bright, dry. What can you grow there? What can you do there? And so that's a little bit of an exploration on this. And I'll show you a little bit. This is from today, yesterday's. So you know the visitor center, and you're coming into the garden, you've got those 2 staircases. This is on the left-hand side. And you probably never even noticed this little area there, which is basically weeds. And we started trying, this was actually about 5 years ago, we started trying some of these succulents in deep pots with pure perlite. Perlite. Tall, narrow pots with perlite. Just to try growing some plants that would rot for us in the ground. Like Madagascar plants, hey, a couple of them grow too dry, since it's, it kind of likes their summer growing, but it can rot. Let's see if we can give it some drainage. And it's worked. So we've got some vegetables like subtropical, some really neat plants from there up in Africa. And we started doing that. But it's also nice if you look at up north, if you go to New England, a lot of people grow plants in pots and replant them every year. You got your annuals, you add the soil. If we left regular potting soil in here, after 3 years or so, it's going to really start turning to CO2 gas. It just breaks down, your pot drops. But perlite doesn't go anywhere. It's very light, area to expand. So you can grow things year after year. So the first one we tried with this method, maybe 6 years ago, we haven't repotted it. Still growing fine. So super low maintenance. So we kind of took that and extended it, and this is through grants, actually. Should give them a shout out, the Stan Smith Horticultural Fund. And what they like to support, seriously, I love these guys, experimental public horticulture. And they're nice, they get grant. So we're able to build this wall, and I used this pre-existing, basically it was just a retaining wall. They built off it to make a raised bed. That's all filled with perlite. You can always pull something out and replant, but it's all perlite over the ground, a bunch of pots. We're trying some different things. Just to give an idea, trying different groupings, different types of plants that might work well in courtyards. Things like a subtropical or stendia, a lot of adeniums, there's all these different adeniums we can grow here. That I think would work really well in balconies. Some other bottom. So you find a lot of different groups, not specific to a place, but a lot of different things. One group we like a lot, it's very popular in California, very popular now in Thailand. Hybridizing all these Madagascar aloes to make all these different colors. I think they're fairly fun. So that's one I think is potential. But also, this is something, we grow a lot of pachypodiums. There's like pachypodiums, kind of the Madagascar palm. Well, this is the dwarf species. This is Propagation. It'll make short stem. And it's in full leaf right now. It's starting to grow. It just looks like a pile of silver potatoes. And it's basically you took the pack buddy and just telescoped it down. And you can't know that out in the garden. Somebody's going to step on it. It's low to the ground. You can't even see it. You walk right over it. So when you think about someone's balcony, smaller plants generally work better. They're not great in the landscape. So this is much more it's kind of taking the Madagascar plant and bringing it a little more into a toolbox setting of what somebody can do, or at least some of the species they could grow, put together on their yard. Of course, we're doing collections, so we want to get some oddballs in there. I mentioned neophyte. Well, there's 3 genera of neophytes. One you saw, a very tropical guy growing in the rainforest. The other one is this guy here, not the best photo in the world. That's a Welwitschia. And Welwitschia is an oddball one from Namibia. If you're not familiar with it, if you grow a seed, it's got 2 little first leaves. The next 2 leaves last the rest of its life, which can span over 1,000 years. So it just has this leaf that continues to get longer. I can grow it in Miami. People grow it in Miami. It's been grown in Miami. You can keep it under cover and all of this. We're trying to deep train it to see if we can actually grow it outdoors.
Is that
Yeah.
like a cactus?
Hmm?
Is that like a cactus type?
You know, being a neophyte, I wouldn't even call it necessarily a succulent, but it needs deep drainage. It is a desert plant. So this is not something we're adding extra irrigation to. The problem with some of these succulents, even though they may like some summer rain, we can have so much summer rain that they can really rot without that extra irrigation. And we'll see if we can get going. Keep it rolling and fun. Also not a great photo, jumping out. This is the Fedra. You ever heard of the Fedra? The Fedra, witch's broom. Yeah, it's easy to see. If you go to the Grand Canyon, you can see greater Fedras growing. They love cool winters and all this. This is one from the Canary Islands. A little more tropical, but it'll rot in the ground. We just never been able to do it. But at least we can have a Fedra for classes and teaching. Mixed in with the rest of ours that we're on.
Is calcine clay ever used for drainage?
Clays are, I wouldn't think people use clay for drainage. It's really small, maybe sand, larger particle size.
And where do you get your sharp sand?
God, I'd have to check our distributor. Nat will order a ton of sharp sand, but I'm not using sand here. I'm using just perlite. It's really light here. Sand gets heavy and condensed. It's very heavy. Where is this at? I have this one I really like, and I was really surprised by it. This one we kind of experimented. This is the Madagascar euphorbia, kind of like your crown of thorns group, but no spines, which is supposed to grow in wetter areas. But putting the full sun, no irrigation perlite, it's looking really green, lush, just flowering. Looks to me like it might have both potential south-facing balconies. Anyway, just gotta think about balconies, and I do have to mention this. That's sort of fun. This is something she had sold on. And you may notice this photograph is better than this one. That's the same plant, just a little older. And what happened is, Chad really got into Sansevierias, which actually I think is a really neat thing. It's a fun group because they're so popular as an indoor house plant, but only 1 or 2 species grown, so all its diversities. The collectors in California have to bring them indoors because they freeze. Arizona, they always freeze. They got to bring them to the greenhouse. So here they're basically Kenyan. They really match our climates. And they're very sculptural. This is one we're kind of hoping they can get a really long down curve leaf. Rather than growing at ground level, if you grow in a pot, maybe you got a nice leaf kind of going to the ground. But what happened was we started getting all these Sansevierias in. On that trip to Huntington, when we went to get the woody eyes, we stopped by places on the way back, and we went to president of the Sansevieria Club in Tucson and all these places, trying to get some Sansevierias, to try them out in South Florida, but we don't have many. And we started putting them in our plant sale. And so what happened was there was a New York Times columnist who was interested in house plants and looking at Sansevierias and trying to find more diversity available, and came across our plant sales website. They then contacted Chad, and they sent a photographer down and did an interview to write an article on Sansevierias. It was kind of fun because they're new balcony.
What is this one native to?
What's that?
What is that native to?
Sansevierias are mainly from East.
The one that you have, the previous.
Yeah, that one's East African.
So
That's gonna be like a Kenyan fruit.
Instead of Sansevierias.
Most of the genus is East African. That's which is really summer growing. I got the hot, wet winters, drier, or hot, wet summers, drier winters. And so we've been collecting these. They ended up coming down and doing a profile story on them. And we're still growing this plant. It's actually right here, keeping that going. So anyway, how am I doing on time here? It's about right. What do you think?
So you put that in Fairchild, do you think that goes something? Because Fairchild was saying that to me.
Hmm?
Fertilize it? No.
Yeah, especially when I first planted them, but in time I won't. You can really kind of slow some of these down. So I planted them small, I added some just Nutricoat, really slow release. Let them grow, but some of those plants I did not do anything for almost 5 years, no fertilizer. And you kind of slow the growth down. And often with the academiums, you can actually get more flowering. You lower that nitrogen, you tend to get more flowering. So
When they feed from? Because Fairchild has no nutrient.
it don't take much. They don't have to grow a lot. Let's get in there. Yeah.
So I have a collection of rare euphorbias and podiums. And thanks to that exhibit that you have, I did pure perlite and 20% worm casting. And they're all doing fine now. They're not rotting to death.
Great, good. So it's working. And I should say, I should be really careful. It's pure perlite down there. The top 6 inches, I am, like you say, I'm mixing in some potting soil. I know in 3 years it's going to disappear, but that time the roots will be down. It's tough.
I do 20%.
Right, that's, yeah, I might be doing it a little higher, but just in that first 6 inches, just to kind of get things established. You know, but it's the whole thing. Makes sense. I would do it, it's just too much room, too much effort. So, but I'm glad it's working. I love it. I love to hear more about the collection. Love those shares. Anyway, I'm knitting with this one here. I think it's been about an hour. So, right? I did cut out a lot. Later, how the song goes into how we decide where we plant, where we plant. That's a whole other thing. It's 15 slides. Historically, in the garden, we've got all these different plots now. We really try to make the garden look different as you go from plot to plot. And so we got to think about not just recurring the same plant across plots. Absolutely. We still got a lot of old room, but a lot of new places developing. And I leave it at that. If you guys have questions, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. I get walking towards here, and I noticed, of course, of all the new plants, a lot of them aren't labeled. Are we catching up with the label?
They are catching up the latest. One of the problems is they're small and flat. People don't find them. So what we got to do is have more larger public display labels. And if things get too big, it's always an argument the sign and encroaching on the book. We're doing more now in the conservatory. We just turn up a bunch of taller stakes to get them off. Part of me would love to have a bunch of bigger display stakes that we can move around, especially when something's flowering like this. I mean, we need more display labels. But if you actually look and dig around these things, it's pretty good. But it's hard to find. You gotta like this expert like in your hand. But we do need better display labels. And that's not what Jesus is printing.